So up here is where you see pictures of the motorman's bunkhouse. That was the hospital. It was kind of in this flat up in here. And then what they called the upper yard, there were 3 stub tracks. They were kind of up in this area as well. But in 1910, during the Avalanche, they had maintenance away cars, some Wellington cars, and it was just plugged with snow. And then, of course, the tunnel is further up that way, which gives you an idea. The tunnel is beyond those trees there.
Yeah.
Now, if you think the tunnel is there, and you pan your eye over and realize that the Baylitz Hotel was clear over against that hillside, you start to wonder, okay, had they shoved the passenger trains into the tunnel, how do you get people from clear up there
to here,
clear down there to get something to eat?
to half a mile.
Yeah, in that storm.
Right.
Just not practical at all. So people have to understand the distance. There's a long ways between the tunnel and the facilities. So anyway, this was taken post 1910,
right.
And the new
It used to be this way, wasn't it?
see, the new runaway track is already in place.
Yeah.
That's not the old runaway track. The new one's already been taken out. And see all this construction here?
Right.
They're building the new shed. And then there's a train wreck up here.
Yeah.
See that?
This should have been this way a little farther, right? Or down there.
I mean, it's such a bad picture. I'm wondering if that's just remains of the old tool shed, and actually the depot's already. And out in this flat here is undoubtedly, they had a very long platform, so the platform probably would have been here. Out in here would have been the, you see the big tool shed and the section men's shed. It would have been out in here. And I agree with you, Kevin. I think the depot sat right in here. Yep. There's kind of this level right here. Yep. I believe. Now you have to remember too, originally the depot was set up for the switchbacks.
Right.
So it was originally facing that way because the switchback line went around. And then, yeah, when they dug the tunnel, they spun it. And so then it faced this way. And if you go back in here, it's hard to see. Back in here, I don't know if we can find it. There's the remains of a wall.
I think it's a little farther.
Down this way, isn't it?
Yep.
And I think that wall was part of the old retaining wall behind the depot. So you had the depot here. Baylitz Hotel was just on the other side of the runaway track, along parallel to the hill, right above there.
Some of the footings you can still see how they
ran that way, yeah. So you can tell with the hotel there, the station here, the runaway track, the original runaway track switch would have been kind of right in here someplace. Meath and Company had a real good view of the proceedings when they went to steal a turkey. But anyway, yeah, you can just picture the depot right here covered with snow and O'Neill inside pacing back and forth trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do. That runaway track in 1910 wasn't there. That was just an open slope. And then there were just all kinds of shacks and stuff up along the side. There was supposedly the Fogg brothers had some kind of a saloon up that way. That was kind of the bottom end saloon. And then, like I say, Baylitz was there, depot there, Mortimer's bunkhouse up there. Okay, so we can head down to where the siding and the train sat. Now, during the event in 1910, they were really worried because this creek stopped flowing. And it was dammed up there somewhere. I remember reading bits and pieces where they were trying to figure out where it was dammed up just from a snow slide or something. Then I think eventually it did. There wasn't like a huge gusher water, but there was talk about them really concerned because all of a sudden this creek stopped flowing. This is the new shed where we're in right now, but this in 1910 would have been the main line. And then when they built the shed, they moved the main line in. So the whole shed was dug into the hillside and up to form these footings. and everything got shifted in a little bit. So 1910, this would have been the main line, and then out beyond here would have been where the sidings were and where the two trains sat. And the other thing you have to keep in mind now, the throat of the yard is actually right there. The passenger trains were beyond that, and again you have a major distance between the passenger trains and where the hotel was. People have this thinking that they were just right there, but they weren't. They were quite a ways away.
Right, and in that blizzard you were
exactly. So yeah, so anytime you walk through the shed, visualize that the main track is over here. This was hillside. Now, if the hillside was still here, we'd have to be out there. What they call the upper spur would be right up here, and it went clear down to where the coal chute was. And then in March of 1910, or February, you talk about O'Neill's private car. It was on that spur, so it would have been sitting probably slightly above us, a little bit further down on that spur. And then we would right now would be looking at where the big building where they stored the electric locomotives. It went up that little spur, and then they went in that way. That whole big building would have been right here, right? Like I say, up on the hill. We'd probably be up here looking about like that at it. It would have been sitting right here at the time. Yeah, exactly. So again, if you see pictures of old Wellington, you see that big motor shed, it would be right about here inside what is now the concrete shed, because again, they dug in and moved out to build this shed and changed the whole hillside. We're kind of getting down to where the throat of the yard was. The switches would have been out here off of the main line, and they would have, the side tracks would have gone out this direction. And so the mail train would be on the far outside, the passenger train would be on the more of the inside switch. I always thought it was interesting, they, when you read the testimony, you pick up little bits and pieces, and the passenger train was on the inside, what was known as the westward passing track. The mail train was on the outside, they called that the eastward passing track. The idea, or no, it's the other way around, I'm sorry. The passenger train was on the eastward, mail train on the westward passing track. Well, you read into that, had they, by rule, that mail train would be sitting where a train would, a freight train or train would sit if it was going to be bypassed by something else coming down the hill. So in other words, say you had a freight train, and for whatever reason, maybe you had a guy coming up the hill here on the main, but you wanted to run a passenger train around the whole mess. You'd put the freight train on the first siding in, the faster train would go on the outside and bypass it. So that leads me to believe, had they got the line open, guess which train would have gone down the mountain first? 25 the passenger train or 27 the mail train? By rule, the mail train was set up to where it was going to bypass the passenger train and head down the hill. Oh yeah, it was all about the money. So yeah, that's a little nuance you catch when you say, okay, this is how they operated the railroad, therefore, this is what was going on. So now we get further down into where the yard was. They had a broke down snowplow, the X807, and a broke down locomotive, the 700. They would have been parked kind of out in here, maybe a little bit further down, because they were snugged up behind the train 25. So probably out in this area here, and you see the picture of the overturned plow, which was even on the Facebook site that you have, Ross. That was the X807, and it would have been kind of out in here someplace. Again, it's really hard to judge the distances because we just don't know, but knowing about where the debris trail is down below, and knowing, you know, other pictures of the turned over locomotive and the turned over plow, it would have been in here someplace. And then the passenger train, again, kind of getting a feel for distance from here to the hotel, I'm guessing we're probably coming up on where the rear of the passenger train was. And again, you have to remember, it would have been out in here someplace. I'm not sure, probably just beyond where the pillars are now. And then the next track would have come out and the mail train was on the other side of it. And then the coal chute and water tank, or even beyond that, they were clear down about where, just this side of where the shed starts making a corner. So anytime they talk about the plows and the locomotives stopping for coal and water, it wasn't up by the depot. They were clear down here, and that's why oftentimes you see where O'Neill or one of the officers would ask the telegrapher, well, is the plow in town? Well, I don't know. I haven't got the staff yet. They had the staff system. They'd be holding on to the staff. They'd be clear down there, and there's no visual. You couldn't see, so you had no clue. And that was probably the big thing you have to remember now from 1910, just what they thought was just great communication, telegraph. They had this staff system to control the trains. You know, by our standards, they are just, how can you function? And really, once a train went around the corner from the depot there and out of sight, they had no idea what was going to happen until it showed up at the next little station. And that's, of course, why they had so many stations so close together. You literally did not know what was going on. And that was, of course, a huge thing they had to overcome during this whole event. It's just they didn't know what was going on.
That's interesting. I would have always thought that everything all happened down here, that the coal was down here, they built the new coal chute.
Yeah, exactly.
Coal chute was, they just made a bigger one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was cleared up, because you have to remember it was set up to service the switchbacks.
Right.
And that's why this yard was clear down here. It was all set up, and then right where the yard throats together is where they went around the backside for the switchbacks. And when they built the tunnel, they still hadn't, and I don't even know, had it not been for Avalanche, whether they would have significantly changed it. I doubt it. Because this, remained as the main passing track area down here.
No reason.
Yeah. So yeah, you have to kind of remember that. Things were really spread out back then. Getting down to where the overlook is, to where the Avalanche really took out the trains, and so again, you have to picture that here would be the main line, out where all that brush is. We'd be walking by the coaches of the passenger train right now, and the mail train would be tucked over on the other side, just kind of beyond where those big trees are. And you can see through there, it's pretty wide. Partly it's just because they took the tailings from cutting the shed out and pushing over the side, but partially that was just the yard where they had the two passing tracks beyond us. Okay, we'll take our life in our hands and do some illegal stuff and go down into the canyon and see the debris.
The bill for the...
Well, I was going to ask Kevin, what do you think? I've often wondered, you see this little bump here, if this wasn't where the track was.
That's what I was thinking, because I've been out here a lot looking, because you can see little humps where the...
Yeah, and I really think this section right here, Ross, and you can see there's a little curb right here, and see there's, like Kevin said, see these indentations right here? This is where the mail train was sitting, was right here. And then about where you're standing, Ross, right kind of over here, you see some more indentations, matter of fact, remnants of ties. This would be where the passenger train was sitting, was right here. And so one of the reasons there was such terrible carnage with the railroad men was they were on board the mail train, sleeping. When the slide came down, it literally piled the passenger train on top of the mail train and took it down the canyon. But this would be right where the two trains sat. The passenger train would be here, and the mail train would be right here. And we're probably about, I would say about mid-train right in here. The locomotives would have been that way, Baylett's Hotel in Wellington up that way.
And now at this point, we're quite a ways away, like you were talking.
Yeah, we're a quarter of a mile plus from the hotel. So again, it was a major undergoing for passengers to get from the train up to the hotel in that storm. You see a lot of pictures of this stump. It was in 1910, it was on the front page of the Seattle Times. Supposedly a child was wrapped around the stump, which I think is total BS. But the beauty of this whole thing here is you can really understand exactly what happened to one car. if you come over here, you see this. And the other half of it, although it's gone now, there's more debris on this side of this giant log, along with this pipe. Now this is, there's a lot of different names for it. I always refer to it as a queen pin. This is the part, if you see old pictures of old cars, or even in the cartoon cars, there's some metal rods that kind of go underneath the car. They slope down from one end, go the length of the car, and slope up the other. This held those metal rods. So what you're looking at is upside down. Its normal position would be the other way, and it was part of the support for underneath the car. These were specific to different cars. So if you look through all the old photographs, you'll find that this particular model was underneath one of the shorter express mail cars. Were they 35-footers, the short ones? So we don't know if it was on 27 or 25. You would think, well, the mail train, but the 25 had one of those shorter cars as well. Makes no difference. What happened is, picture this underneath the car, clear on top of the hill, right straight above us. The slide hits. This giant log has come down from way up above in the slide. The slide hits the car, flips the car over onto its top, spins the car around. Now the car is totally inverted. The bottom side of the car is up. This log comes down, scrapes across the bottom of the car, and takes with it this and all the air and steam pipes underneath the car with it. Comes screaming down the hill and wedges between this stump and probably some other debris here, forcing this underneath the log and twisting these pipes around that stump. So it gives you just the immense strength of that avalanche. So it would take a giant rail car, turn it, flip it, and then this log just raked the bottom of it and just tore all this stuff out from under it and wrapped it around this stump. But it gives you a real clear view of what was going on inside that avalanche when it came down. So this is probably the best example of what's left of just how the mechanics of that avalanche hit. When it hit, just what was going on. It gives you an idea of just the power.
See the toolbox right there? Yep. Mm-hmm. The queen posts are just under the end of where the truss rods came down. Truss rods were tightened up to keep the support of the car squared, and the queen posts were used as a support that those rods went against right here, and it pulled it tight. Mm-hmm.